So I wanna read out a quick report that came while you're speaking before I go back to my questions. So I haven't read it yet. According to a report from CNN, and we've been seeing these all day, so it's like really difficult to
Yeah.
understand which ones are intentional leaks as part of the information warfare versus genuine leaks. Tasneem did report something interesting earlier today. They said um, um, Iranian officials got told by American officials not to listen to what Trump says on Truth Social because that's all for the media and for the people in the US. So more part of a narrative and not actually part of a deal. So they told him to just ignore what Trump posts about, according to Tasneem News. So the report that just came in now from CNN, a senior Trump administration official claimed that the deal would commit Iran to giving up its highly enriched uranium, which, according to most sources, the MOU has nothing to do. Commit. Okay, that could be a commitment, which Trump refers to as nuclear dust, with the official summarizing the approach as no dust, no dollars, adding that this is the trust but verify on steroids. An Iranian source told CNN that the strait is already open, but that the coordination with Iranian authorities is required to ensure safe transit, while also stressing that the most important thing for us is that the war must end for good in the whole Middle East. They're really quadrupling down on Lebanon. They're not budging an inch on Lebanon. Trump separately told Netanyahu he supports Israel's right to maintain freedom of action against threats on all fronts, including Lebanon, according to an Israeli official. So that says it all. Three different sources, three different stories in that one report. The US is saying we're not going to unfreeze anything until you get the uranium. Iran is saying we control the Strait of Hormuz and the war needs to end everywhere. And another Israeli source is saying, Trump says, Israel could keep fighting in Lebanon. It is so difficult to reach a deal. It's like all sides are pulling in all these different directions. You start to wonder how much decision-making powers the president really has, and the American president really has. When all these, like when I decide something in business, when I decide something, everyone can give me an opinion and I make a decision and everyone goes with it. It's how businesses operate. Now, I would expect the same thing here. Everyone gives their opinion to Trump, whether it's Netanyahu, his senators, the list goes on. They all give an opinion to Trump. And then Trump makes a decision, everyone goes with that decision. Now, I understand Israel has agency, but Trump could easily strong-arm Netanyahu. Trump is more popular than Netanyahu in Israel. So if push comes to shove, Netanyahu needs Trump more than Trump needs Netanyahu. That's my way of looking at it. Okay. So I don't get why Trump just doesn't crack the whip and just make a deal or just walk away and stop this charade. I don't think he can walk away anymore. I don't think he can walk away because he keeps threatening he will strike if there's no deal. So he's in the corner.
I can start by giving you 250 million reasons. The amount of money that Miriam Adelson gave to Donald Trump. Then you've got the political pressure, the likes of Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz. In fact, a significant number of his Republican donor base would be just furious if he makes any concessions to Iran. And again, it's all predicated on the lie spread that, Iran is this fanatical regime responding to a leading terrorist threat in the world, which it's not. It's absolutely not. The facts, particularly over the last 26 years. In fact, the only one that has been helping sponsor radical Islamic terrorism is the United States itself. And when the Israelis want to complain about Hamas and, look at what Hamas has done to us. You guys funded them. You funded Hamas for the very purpose of trying to blow up and destroy a peace process. So nobody, neither Washington nor Tel Aviv accept any responsibility whatsoever for all the death and mayhem that they've caused. So what has happened, I guess, behind the scenes, what Pakistan is working on is it's solidifying its relationship with the Saudis. The Saudis now have, before the Saudis felt they didn't have any protection, they had to rely upon the United States. They now no longer have to do that. But in the course of that, Pakistan's also brokering a permanent security arrangement between Iran and Saudi Arabia so that the Saudis don't have to fear. Iran has never been in the business of exporting his Islamic revolution. It's true. It has absolutely provided support to Hezbollah and to Hamas over the years, but Iranian support's not the critical ingredient in that. I'd venture to say I think Israel provided more money, billions of dollars, to Hamas than Iran did, for starters. But this ultimately getting the Palestinian people a homeland and self-determination, that's not subversive. That's humanitarian. And Israel in the process is, and I think Brendan Weichert made this point with you earlier, pointing out that Israel has been its own worst enemy diplomatically. It's managed to alienate most of the Middle East, and now at least Turkey and Egypt, they are more open, listening to the kind of diplomatic solution that Pakistan is proposing. And again, Pakistan is proposing it with the full weight of the Chinese and the Russians behind them. So this is, Russia and China were dead serious about trying to create a new security architecture in the Persian Gulf, one that's not dependent upon U.S. flexing military muscle there. Now, if Saudis and Qataris hold firm, the United States will, if it tries to restart military attacks on Iran, it's going to face some real obstacles.
Iran made a threat. Drop Site News reported on this. Iran said it will consider any attack on its territory a resumption of the Third Gulf War and would target Israel and the GCC countries. Any attack on its territory. So that kind of crosses out the idea, because there was a theory coming out that the US may ask Israel to strike Iran, and the US may not strike Iran. So Iran, when it retaliates, only focuses on Israel, not strike the Gulf. But Iran's making it clear any strike will drag everyone into it. A source close to the IRGC said Iran's retaliation would result in the oil and gas infrastructure of the GCC countries coming under attack, and the Houthis closing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, blocking the Red Sea. So Iran is drawing a very big red line against any military action.
Well, understand that Israel cannot attack Iran without U.S. support. It needs the air refueling capabilities at a minimum to launch any kind of significant attack with the U.S. supplied F-35 jets. They have to be refueled before they could even get within firing range of Iran. And I'm assuming that they launch something like Tomahawks or JASSMs, because they're not going to fly over Iranian territory and get shot down. They're going to do a standoff again. They need to be refueled at least 2 times inbound, and they're going to need to be refueled at least 2 times trying to get back to home base. So that air refueling capability is huge, and that can't be underestimated.
I think, didn't they get a few refueling tankers that are being delivered now? I think I read it somewhere that they're finally getting refueling tankers, and some Gulf countries are not happy about it. Not operational yet, so probably still need the Americans now. Because there's talks about how they were able to strike Qatar, because they shouldn't have the capacity to strike Qatar unless they use a refueling tanker or they alter the fighter jets. Legally, they can't make any alterations to the fighter jet. No country has. I've heard, you might know more than this than I do, but I've heard that the Israelis are the only ones that altered their fighter jets, despite the Americans barring any clients of those fighter jets to make any alterations.
Well, they could, they could attach additional fuel tanks, but that's usually for ferrying those jets from one point to another. That's not carrying a combat load. So when they're carrying a combat load, their effective distance is about 550 miles, nautical miles. And just look at the map from it. Pick your spot in Israel to get to, say, Qatar. I think that's about 800 miles. So right off the bat, they're going to need refueling, and then even when they get to Qatar, they need to be refueled again. Because even if they launch, let's say they just launch from the Persian Gulf side of Qatar towards Iran, if they use the JASSM, those have a range of about 500 miles. Again, Iran is a massive country, so I don't care how many jets. Israel does not have the size of an air force of such a size as to blanket Iran. They don't. And as soon as if bombs start falling on Iran, the Iranians aren't going to waste a minute. They're locked and loaded, and so they will pull the trigger, and then the war will be back on in full in full horror. So this is, again, Iran has played this very cool. They're willing to talk, they're willing to negotiate, but they're not willing to surrender.
Yeah, Brendan Weikart, you mentioned the interview. He said something interesting. He said, "Mario, I wrote a whole book on in that book. I make assumptions that Iran are just a bunch of fanatics. That if they get their hands on a nuclear weapon, they'll cause significant harm." And he's like, "Mario, one thing I learned from this war is they're a lot more pragmatic than I thought." Not sure if you remember, you heard that segment, which was interesting to see how his perspective of Iran has changed over the years. And it seems a lot of people have seen a different side of Iran in this war. Again, there's a lot of criticism that could be targeted at various things that they've done in terms of strategies. But as a whole, from a military perspective, it was a pragmatic escalation ladder, a tit-for-tat response. And the whole negotiations process, they have their stance, and they've been pretty consistent with it throughout. If anything, I'm trying to be balanced here, but if anything, on Trump's side, he's the one that's making those outlandish claims about wiping out a civilization, talking about a big blow. This rhetoric is not coming out of Iran. And that's coming from someone, as you know me, I'm very critical of the Iranian government. But still, that their behavior so far, I think what they're asking for, why wouldn't they ask for this? They've gone through decades of sanctions. Now, what do you think? Would you think the Iranians would accept? So I think they would. If the US agrees to unfreeze a bunch of assets right now, without any preconditions, do you think Iran would not charge a fee for the Strait of Hormuz? Because they could do it later. They could say, all right, we're not going to charge one. They can change their mind in 6 months. But that seems like a possible middle ground for both sides to be able to meet and get some sort of MOU signed. Just the two concessions. We stop the war everywhere. I think there should be none. That should be such an easy one to achieve, in my view. A lot of people say that's going to be impossible. I spoke to Karen. She's like, Mario, no way Trump can stop Netanyahu in Lebanon. But the one I think they can both agree on is the unfreezing of assets and the Iran not charging at all.